star of truth down shining through clouds of doubt and fear. I ask beneath thy guidance, my pathway may appear. However long the journey, however hard it be, though I be lone and weary, lead on, I follow thee. I know thy blessed radiance can never lead astray, though ancient creed and custom may point another way, or through the untrod desert, or over trackless sea. Though I be lone and weary, lead on, I follow thee.
Did you hear the one about the man who was praying one day? He asked God, "What is 1,000,000 years to you?" God said, 1,000,000 years to me is like 1 second. The man thought, and then he asked, God, what is $1,000,000 worth to you? God said, $1,000,000 to me is like a penny. So the man said, God, can I have a penny? And God said, sure, wait just a second. Welcome to this online service of Neshoba Unitarian Universalist Church, where laughter is a spiritual practice. And those kind of jokes work a lot better when you guys are actually here and laugh at them. But I'm going to assume that you all laughed. I am the Reverend Beth Lefever, pleased and privileged to serve as the minister of this congregation, and I am very happy that you have chosen to be with us this morning. Our opening words are by the 13th century Sufi mystic Rumi. Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving, ours is no caravan of despair. Come, yet again, come. And now David Cooke will light our chalice.
For our chalice lighting, I've selected words by Sarah Eileen Lawal. Out of the flames of fear, we rise with courage of our deepest convictions to stand for justice, inclusion, and peace. Out of the flames of scrutiny, we rise to proclaim our faith with hope to heal a fractured and hurting world. Out of the flames of doubt, we rise to embrace the mystery, wonder, and awe of all there is and all that is yet to be. Out of the flames of hate, we rise with the force of love, love that celebrates our shared humanity. Out of the flames, we rise. Please raise your voice with me to affirm our covenant. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is our sacrament, and service is our prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve human need, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the divine. Thus do we covenant with each other and with God.
Good morning. Here's a story about a saint, St. Francis of Assisi, written by Robert F. Kennedy Jr. And it all starts quite a long time ago. In Assisi, Italy, near the beginning of the 13th century. Don't ask Mom and Dad if they were born then. It might make them mad. Late one night, the people of Assisi awoke to the sounds of boisterous laughter, music, and singing from the narrow streets of a medieval town. They shook their heads and covered their ears. Yet most of them could not help smiling. Of course, the hilarious songs were the work of that charming rogue Francis Berardone. All Assisi knew Francis as the King of Youth, the leader of an army of wild young men who were lavish with money and only thought of colorful costumes and crazy parties. This is about a saint. In Assisi, everyone loved Francis. He was famous for his manners and his unselfishness. He felt joy at his own good fortune and wanted to share his luck with others. As a boy, Francis vowed that he would give his money to every beggar he met. Francis' mother Pica taught him to love God and told him stories of the knights and their heroic deeds. She was proud of Francis for his kind heart. When Francis was 20 years old, war broke out in Assisi. At last, he could fulfill his dream of becoming a knight. Francis was the first of his friends to join the company of soldiers who fought with long spears, called lances. Francis fought, but he and his fellow lancers were captured and thrown into a dark dungeon. After a year in prison, Francis returned home a hero, but soon afterward he fell ill. For weeks he rode the surrounding countryside wondering what he should do with his life. And then one day he saw something he feared far more than battle or death. He saw a leper. Although Francis is lion-hearted as the bravest of knights, he feared lepers. Francis couldn't bear the sight of these people, with their missing fingers, ears, and noses, their bleeding sores, their scabby faces. He was disgusted by the smell of their rotting flesh. It frightened him to think that just by being near them, he might catch their disease. Lepers were made to live in the woods far from towns and to carry bells, so that people could hear them approach and run for their lives. On this particular day, though, Francis came upon a leper as he rode. His first instinct was to flee. Then he scolded himself for adding to the man's misery. Instead of racing away, he dismounted, gently pressing a bag of money into the leper's hand. Francis embraced the man. A great happiness flooded his whole being. Francis' deed had taken more courage than all his reckless bravery in the battle. He was filled with such joy that he rode to a leper colony 2 miles from Assisi and begged the pardon of all lepers, kissed each of them, and gave them his clothes and his money. Francis continued to wander the countryside looking for a mission to which he could devote his life. Each day during this period of seeking, Francis would pray in San Damiano, an ancient chapel 1/2 mile from Assisi. One day he heard a voice. "Francis, do you see that my house is in ruins? Go and restore it for me." Francis believed that this was a message from God telling him to rebuild the dilapidated church. Overjoyed to have a new vocation, he went home and sold his own horse and a bale of his father's best cloth to buy stones and mortar for the task. But his greedy father did not share the same enthusiasm as Francis did for taking orders from disembodied voices, particularly when it cost him money. Enraged, he chained his son in a dungeon and beat him savagely, demanding that Francis return the money. When Francis refused, his father dragged him to court at the bishop's palace. All the townspeople filled the piazza, eager to watch a feud between the patriarch of one of Assisi's wealthiest families and his wayward son. The bishop was a wise and lonely man. He admired Francis for his bravery and his love of God, but he told the boy to return his father's money. So with that, Francis stripped naked and handed his father the money and his clothing, saying, "Before this day, I have called Pietro Berardone my father, but now I return his money and all his other things as he has given me. Now God is my only father." Standing naked did not help Francis's reputation. Just a few months before, the people of Assisi had considered him a hero. Now everyone was certain he was a lunatic. People laughed at him, children threw mud and stones. He had become the biggest fool in Assisi. A hermit gave Francis a tunic of rough cloth and a piece of rope for a belt. Francis dressed in the modest garb and went to live with the lepers, caring for them as he had before. When he returned to Assisi, it was as a beggar, singing songs on the street corners and pleading for stones instead of food. People laughed as they gave him stones and mortar, which he lugged downhill to repair the church of San Damiano. He lived in the woods and called the sun and moon his brothers. He wrote beautiful poems and sang as he walked through the forests and fields. He made himself the poorest man in the world, but instead of being miserable, he became happier. Blessed is he who expects nothing, Francis said, for he will enjoy everything. Many people thought he was crazy, but others began to listen to his words. A wealthy nobleman named Bernard was the first to announce that he would join Francis in his life of poverty and service to others. Within a few months, several men had joined Francis, including knights, priests, noblemen, a farmer, and a judge. These men called each other friar, meaning brother, and lived in simple huts made of branches and mud. They worked in monasteries or on farms, caring for lepers and giving all the money they earned each day to the poor, trusting in God to provide for tomorrow. As word spread about the friars, soon thousands of brothers were wandering all over Europe. They ate roots and berries, performed good deeds, and comforted the sick. Happiness does not come from comfort or material possessions, Francis said, but from serving others. Francis' example also inspired many women. One of these was Claire, a beautiful young girl from a noble Assisi family. Her parents wanted her to marry, but she had a great yearning to give her life to the poor. Although Claire was young, she inspired thousands of women to give up their worldly possessions and join in the life of poverty and service to others. Francis loved animals and plants, the sea and the stars, and he called all his fellow creatures sister and brother. He forbade friars to chop down living trees, and he would pick worms off the firewood to keep them from being burned. In the winter, he brought warm wine and honey to the wild bees. One day, Francis said to his companions, "Stay by the road and wait for me while I preach to our sisters, the birds." Yes, Francis walked to a nearby meadow, and as soon as he began his sermon, birds from every direction gathered around him to listen. There he is taming a wolf, it looks like. Now Francis knew that his end was near, and he traveled the countryside on his donkey, urging crowds to love their fellow creatures. He was blind and suffered excruciating headaches and other illnesses and could rarely eat. Yet he was more cheerful than ever. Then looking up, Francis saw God in all his glory. The stars that night, as they rose, gazed down upon the happiest man who had ever lived.
Again, I say there is so much need in the world. There is so much want, so much fear and doubt and anxiety. Help us here at Neshoba continue to respond to these needs by the sharing of our resources during this, our morning offering. And please know again how very grateful we are. My first reading this morning and my second are by author and poet Ross Putnam. There is escape from the clamor. There is relief from the dirt, the din. There is separation from the hostility. Political rhetoric, hostile and loud, violence and threats of violence ratchet up tension. Fear invades the day. The temptation could be to hide. The answer could be to run, The urge could be to blame. Instead, be open to possibility. Be receptive to reconciliation. Be inspired by hope. Be moved by hope. Be kindled by glimmers of peace. Be transformed by wisdom. Be enlightened by ancient wisdom. Be illumined by an infant's trusting smile. Be ignited by others' generosity. Be inspired by acts of generosity. Be radiant with belief. Be empowered. And also by Ross Putnam. When tears are near my eyes, so very near. When tears are near my eyes, so very near. Be they from fear or nostalgia, want or plenty, disappointment or triumph. When tears are near my eyes, so very, very near as they overwhelm the dikes which my eyelids thought they were, I now collect them and use them again to water the garden of hope. Well, okay then. This is Wednesday, the day after the election, and I have to write and record my sermon for Sunday, yet today, without knowing at all where we might be and what we might know by Sunday. That is difficult, and I have been fretting about how to handle this particular sermon for some weeks now. As usual, though, the fretting has not enlightened me at all. What to say? What to say? Well, let me start with this. After the 2016 election, we had a service during which we pasted together pieces of a large broken heart, a red poster board heart cut into 6 pieces. We pasted them together on a larger yellow poster board, and I asked the 6 people tasked with bringing forward their pieces of the broken heart to not worry about perfection as they pasted it into the forming whole. Let there be cracks in the heart we're putting back together. That's how the light gets in, I told them. Not an original thought, I might add. I then played the very late, very great Leonard Cohen's beautifully moving song anthem. Ring the bell that still can ring. Forget your perfect offering. There is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. I guess what I would say today is that whether we win or lose, and I say we, because our Unitarian Universalist principles, which guide our beliefs, our ethics, our values, and which define our faith, have us mostly grouped together on one side during this year's election. Whether we win or lose, though, our collective heart is cracked and broken by all that has gone on these past months and years, all the divisiveness, the ugliness, and yes, the hatred. Our collective heart is broken, and we have a lot of work we must do to mend it and to come together once again as a nation. But we need not despair, regardless, because the cracks in our broken heart are how the light will get in to show us the way toward healing. Ring the bell that still can ring. I will be honest with you, it has been really hard for me of late not to give in to hatred. I could soften that and say it's been hard for me not to give in to dislike or disapproval or distaste, but it has at times felt stronger than that. And I would not be serving you by not being authentic about such things. It has been hard at times not to give in to hatred. But that's a battle that must be fought on so many levels and for so many reasons. As a minister in a faith tradition whose very first principle is the proclamation of the inherent worth and dignity of every human person, it is especially important to me that I fight that battle. Because as much as it has perhaps been tested of late, I believe in our first principle, and I embrace it. It is what we as Unitarian Universalists are about. It is what I always want to be about. But that does not mean it is easy. Our principles would be of little value if they were easy, or at least that's what I comfort myself with. So I choose to believe that every human being has inherent worth and dignity. The key word there might well be inherent, but that does not negate the basic truth of the fact that we all are of worth. Every human being, and for many of us, every non-human being as well, is of worth and should be treated with dignity. Again, that does not mean it is easy. That does not mean that we are not occasionally issued powerful invitations to think otherwise, but it is our responsibility to accept or decline those invitations. And declining them is what we are called to do. For if we are not about uplifting, affirming, and promoting the inherent worth and dignity of every person, just what are we about? Just where do we go from here? It is the first of all of our 7 principles and the base upon which the other 6 principles are built. To be successful in embracing the truth of our first principle, it is always helpful for me to remind myself that every one of us here on earth is struggling. We are all fighting a sometimes hard, often scary, often perplexing and overwhelming battle through life. And as different as we are in every way imaginable as human beings, we are all also very much alike and very much in this together. Some of us are more blessed with life's gifts in the ways of wealth and health and privilege than are others, but none of us, regardless of the gifts life or family or circumstances have bestowed upon us, travel life's journey unafraid. That is really helpful for me when I can keep hold of it. Seeing the fear that underscores so much of the vitriol cascading across our nation and the world helps me to move ever the tiniest bit closer to a feeling of tenderness toward my fellow humans. Yes, tenderness. The gift of tenderness that results when a bratty-seeming child suddenly breaks out in tears and we realize that they are soft and hurting on the inside. Or when seeing a bully drop their damaging or obnoxious behaviors, even for an instant, just long enough for us to see the fear and uncertainty within them, and how that can move us to a moment of empathy from which we might be able to reach out, they might be able to respond, and from which warmer feelings might be built. I have been afraid. I am often afraid, and I know how debilitating and isolating and, well, frightening fear is. If we can see, or even just assume, the fear alive and well in all of us, the fear that divides us and hardens us, at least on the outside, it helps us understand and care just a little. And that is where healing can begin. James Baldwin, African-American writer and activist, wrote, "I imagine one of the reasons people cling to their hate so stubbornly is because they sense once hate is gone, they will be forced to deal with pain. And none of us really wants to deal with our pain when anger and hatred are so at the ready to shield us. But I'm tired of anger. I'm tired of anger, and I don't want to slip into hatred. Another way to avoid reacting in anger and hate, as my former therapists Frank and Dixie Morris used to say, is to see the small child inside those who are seemingly being unreasonable. To see the small child in them and to recognize the small child within us as we react. The child in us, the child that never goes away no matter how old or adult we become, is small and to a great extent helpless and innocent. And here we have that word again, afraid. To see the small child in ourselves and others softens us. And what does that child want so very much? They want to be listened to. They want to be heard. So as we begin or continue to try to heal the wounds that have so grievously harmed us all, let us move to a place of listening and hearing and caring about what the other person has to say. We may not agree with them, probably won't, but we may come to understand better the fear that moves them, and they, us. And maybe we all will have felt heard. Maybe the anger will diminish even a little, and maybe we will all feel safer. Ring the bell that still can ring. Amen. Now let us move into a time of meditation, reflection, and prayer, again using words by Ross Putnam. The world needs a song about now. Listen carefully, listen hopefully, listen creatively. Call it distant, call it muffled until you hear not one voice, but many. Join the anthem. Open your heart, go into the world. You'll find others. You'll have to walk away until you hear the sweet light of hope. The world needs that song, a reminder that together we reclaim the vision. Together we will bring that vision to life, pluck it out on an old banjo, strum it to life on a borrowed guitar until every voice is heard. Let us share a time of silent reflection. Amen. And until next week, blessed, blessed be.